Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sugar Smart webinar, all about reducing sugar in schools. We will be looking at some fantastic examples of what Sugar Smart campaigns across the UK have done to address the sugar content of school meals, as well as looking at the whole school environment from special occasions to fundraisers to reward schemes and, of course, packed lunches. My name is Vera. I am the Sugar Smart campaign coordinator, and with me here is Fran, who will be taking over as my maternity cover in a few days. So welcome again. If you have any audio issues, please do just check your settings. Otherwise, you can try logging in again. Or as a last resort, there is the dial-in option that you have seen in your invitation. So please do use that. So to give you guys just a quick overview of our agenda, we will give you a quick housekeeping guide, as well as an introduction to the Sugar Smart campaign and to sustainable food cities. And then we will go into our first presentation from Claire from Bath and Northeast Somerset Council, as well as a Q&A, and a presentation from Marion from Healthy Schools from Islington, from Health Education Trust. And then we'll have another question and answer session. And just to let you guys know, if you have any questions along the way, please use the attendee chat function to send your question through, and we'll be picking those up when we do the Q&A. So without further ado, I will pass on to Fran, who will give you a brief housekeeping guide to our webinar today.
Thanks, Vera. Hello, everyone. I'm Fran, and as Vera just said, I am the maternity cover for the Sugar Smart campaigns coordinator role. So hopefully you'll all be hearing from me very soon. Right, so to kick off with housekeeping. Firstly, the webinar is being recorded, and presentations and all other resources from the webinar will be available on the SFC website in the next couple of weeks, and we'll also be emailing them out to you. Attendees are in listen-only mode, so you can ask questions in the chat box in the bottom left corner, and there will also be a Q&A session at the end. But if we don't have time to answer all the questions, then we'll answer them offline and share the answers with you. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, try to log out and join the webinar again. We recommend you use Firefox or Chrome because these tend to work better. But alternatively, if you're still having difficulty, send a message to us via the separate host messaging section. We can support to some extent, but there is only, unfortunately, so much we can do. Great, so let's crack on with looking at what is Sugar Smart. So Sugar Smart is a campaign of the charity Sustain, and we're helping local areas across the UK to tackle excessive sugar consumption. We work with councils, businesses, institutions and other sectors to help reduce overconsumption of sugar in their local areas. Sugar Smart supports local campaigns to take on a cross-sector approach to transform their food environment and raise public awareness of the impacts of consuming too much sugar. A vital part of Sugar Smart is encouraging a multi-sector approach with local businesses, organisations and residents involved. We know there is no one solution to obesity and poor diet, and only a multi-pronged approach involving everyone will lead to long-term change. So a little bit about Sustain, which is the organisation that runs Sugar Smart. So Sustain advocates food and agriculture policies and practices that enhance the health and welfare of people and animals, improve the working and living environment, and promote equity and enrich society and culture. And you can check out more information at www.sustainweb.org. Okay, so Sugar Smart is one of 51 Sustainable Food Cities network members. So the SFC is a movement of 51 towns, cities, boroughs and counties that share the same approach for transforming food and food culture. And the Sustainable Food Cities approach is about establishing an effective cross-sector food partnership with key stakeholders, so public agencies, businesses, NGOs and academics, incorporating healthy and sustainable food into local policy, strategy and planning, developing and delivering a food strategy and action plan to tackle key food challenges in the local area. The Sustainable Food Cities approach is a tried and tested model for driving positive change. And we work on 6 key issues. Firstly, promoting healthy and sustainable food to the public. Secondly, tackling food poverty, increasing access to affordable healthy food. Building community food knowledge, skills, resources and projects. promoting a vibrant and diverse sustainable food economy, transforming catering and food procurement, and lastly, reducing waste and ecological footprint of the food system. We have a few other campaigns and projects within the wider SFC network. So firstly, Veg Cities, which is our feature campaign of the Sustainable Food Cities, and it's led by Sustain in partnership with the wider Peas Please initiative. And the aim of Veg Cities, unsurprisingly, is to increase availability and consumption of vegetables. So you have food partnerships and or local authorities working with different local businesses and organisations through different actions, from promoting vegetables to supporting local businesses and transforming catering and procurement. And then we'll have a look at Sustainable Fish Cities. This is aiming to make it normal to see sustainable fish on menus across the UK. And they do this by asking the biggest fish-serving businesses across a city to sign a simple but meaningful pledge to serve only verifiably sustainable seafood. So when a city gathers enough pledges, they can be crowned a Sustainable Fish City, and these pledges urge and encourage changes up the supply chain. And lastly, we'll look at Food Power, and Food Power supports alliances to tackle the root causes of food poverty, to give voice to people experiencing food poverty and to evaluate and share what works well. The programme supports local food poverty alliances, learning and sharing good practice, and involving experts by experience and evidencing what works at the local level. Now, the SFC network has a number of different ways in which you can kind of get involved and hear more about what's going on. So the different levels of involvement depend on where your area is in its journey. So first of all, we have the SFC email group for sharing best practice and advice. It's also a newsletter, and you can sign up to both of these on the website, sustainablefoodcities.org. And then there is also there's more information about how you can become a food partnership. If you look at the Join Us section of the website, and network members can attend our series of regional and national events and join webinars and other learning exchange forums. Network members can also benefit from our online resources and from support from the Sustainable Food Cities team. And the Sustainable Food Cities Award is designed to recognise and celebrate the success of those places taking a joined-up, holistic approach to food and that are achieving significant positive change on a range of key food issues. So we've got a little bit more information there, and check out the website for more details, and also the SFC team you can get in touch with through Leon, and his email address is on the screen there. So, Sugar Smart focuses on action across 10 sectors to tackle excessive sugar consumption. So you'll see from the screen there, we've got primary schools and early years, secondary schools, universities and higher education, healthcare and hospitals, workplaces, sports and leisure, restaurants and caterers, retail, tourism and venues, and community groups and organisations. So local authorities and local food partnership organisations with cross-sectoral links lead on coordinating Sugar Smart campaigns, for example, Sugar Smart Bristol, and engage various education settings, organisations and businesses in taking part in the campaign and reducing sugar within their settings. So, as of November 2018, 29 campaigns are now launched and doing wonderful work engaging a variety of sectors within their communities. And a little update on activities across local Sugar Smart campaigns. So local campaigns develop a variety of approaches tailored to their local needs and priorities, some focused on community engagement and education, particularly in areas of high deprivation, while others focused on work with local providers to improve their food on offer. Some focused on changing policies within their remit, while others recruited partners such as universities and businesses they hadn't worked with before. Most campaigns, though, took a mixture of these approaches. So just a bit of a campaigns update. So we now have 29 campaigns which have been launched, a further 25 are in development and already taking action. And there are over 1,400 participating organisations, businesses and settings that have signed up to the campaign, with most having already committed to and making changes to reduce sugar overconsumption in their areas. Brilliant.
Hello, this is Vera again. So I will give you guys a brief update on how primary schools and early year settings have engaged with the campaign. Firstly, of those 1,400 sector participants, over 500 are primary schools and early year settings. So we know that this is certainly the most active of the 10 sectors. Which is fantastic when we think about the long-term health outcomes of our future generations. Of Within the matrix of actions for primary schools in early years, there are 17 actions available for schools to choose from. These are education activities, as well as addressing school policies and improvements to the school food environment. Popular actions include sugar reduction, sugar smart assemblies, getting kids creative on different activities, such as promotional stands or video projects to address the issues around sugar a bit more in depth, healthy lunchbox policies, and promoting free drinking water. So a little bit more about some of the really interesting examples of activities that have come out from our network. Following on from a school meals audit, which you will hear about a little more in a few minutes, that was conducted by Healthy Schools Islington. The school's caterer in Islington then looked, so the caterer's Catering. So what they did is actually looked at reducing the sugar in their primary school meals by about half, so by about 50% across its contracts. And this actually was rolled out across its contracts in South England. They linked up with Sugar Smart campaigns in Hackney and Isle of Wight as well. Their average sugar content was brought down to 4.5 grams of sugar per school meal, and not any above 6.5 grams per meal. And now this is something that's rolled out across all of their contracts. So something that can happen in one corner of Sugar Smart can have huge ripples and implications for the rest of the network across the UK. Some other lovely examples, Churnside Primary School in Glasgow ran a Sugar Smart festive fundraiser fair. So definitely a challenging issue, how to fundraise without relying on sugary treats and snacks. They worked with their Parent and Teacher Association and the children to offer snacks and treats that contained little to no free sugar, and it was really well received. Students at Heath Ryburn Primary in Aberdeen, they actually led on designing a Ditch the Fizz campaign aimed at supporting children, teachers, and parents to reduce their sugary drinks consumption. That was brilliant. Greenmount School in Isle of Wight hosted a healthy eating day for year 6 students to prepare them for entry into secondary school, where they designed their own healthy snacks and took on sugar reduction challenges. So these are some of the ways that different campaigns have engaged their school community. And all of these, you can see these case studies and stories on the Sugar Smart website for more information. So a few other updates that I think are useful for the primary schools in early years settings is that Sugar Smart campaigns in Bristol, Brighton and Hove, and Cornwall, not to mention other campaigns. So this is just a few examples. So these campaigns have actually embedded Sugar Smart registration and sugar reduction actions into their local award schemes for food businesses, workplaces, and schools. So Cornwall is now making Sugar Smart campaign participation a part of getting a healthy schools status. So it's a fantastic way to get more settings involved. And so just a little brief update, just overview on how to get involved in the Sugar Smart campaign. So the central resource is our website. So this is a place to register. If you're a setting, such as a school, you can register to Go Sugar Smart. If you are looking to run a campaign within your area, working across sectors, so say if you're a local authority or food partnership, you can register to run a campaign. And if you're interested as an individual, you can either sign up for our newsletter or sign up to volunteer with your local campaign. So for those who are participating as organizations, our website is a database of resources. This is where you can access resources to aid you in public engagement, as well as changing policies and making changes to your food on offer. This is also where you can log your actions and capture the breadth of your impact locally. Campaign coordinators also use the dashboard to have an oversight of all of the local work happening in their areas that are being run by the various settings getting involved. And so definitely check it out, register, and get involved. And that's just a little, what you see here is what the dashboard looks like for participants. So this is where you can update the different actions you are taking. And also with each action, we have linked a variety of resources that can help you along the way, which you can access through the website as well. So for primary and early year settings, some of the resources that have been developed as a result of the projects that we'll be hearing out from the presenters will actually be on the dashboard. So and that's it for our update. So do get in touch if you have any questions. Do register if you haven't already. And without further ado, we will start Claire's presentation. So I will upload it now.
Thanks, Vera. That's great. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Claire Davis. I'm Development and Commissioning Manager in the Public Health team in Baines Council, and I've been coordinating the Sugar Smart campaign. So before I talk specifically about educational settings in schools, I thought I'd just give you a brief overview of our campaign. So we launched back in May 2016, and it was a 2-year community-wide campaign, and I'm sure similar aims and objectives to all of your local campaigns to raise awareness for sugars in everyday foods and drinks, and also to reduce the availability of high sugar foods and drinks in targeted settings. In our steering group, when we set up, we agreed that we would work across 4 key sectors, so educational settings, public sector. We've done a lot of work with our hospital site in Bath, thinking about the catering in terms of staff canteens and also the public menus, and engagement with pharmacies and GPs, and also more recently dentists. Sports and leisure centre, so we were lucky that when we were just launching the campaign, our leisure contract was up for renewal. So within that, we've incorporated healthier vending within our sports and leisure sites, and also introduced kind of the campaign messages through inductions for gym memberships and those kind of things. And then we decided to have a priority neighbourhood of Radstock and Westfield, which has got our highest prevalence of obesity in adults and children, and also tooth decay. So we set up a community grant scheme there with one of our local partners to enable community groups to bid for money to support some of their Sugar Smart actions. So to date, we've got around 80 organisations registered on the website, and we know that we are working with more than that, but it's just getting them to sign up and make sure they're recording their pledges on the Sustain website. So in terms of educational settings, first of all, we consulted with schools through our Director of Public Health Award. So that was our local Healthy Schools programme that we had, which actually finished at the end of last year. But when we launched the campaign, that was up and running. So we kind of wanted to find out what was a realistic ask of schools in terms of being a Sugar Smart setting in that, and what that might look like. We developed age-specific resources, and this was kind of to help show where the food and drink was hidden in popular items that we may see in lunchboxes or snacks promoted in supermarkets for children and young people. And we wanted to demonstrate how that could easily build up across the day. And we carried out consultation with groups of young people and parents in some early year settings, just to make sure that the messages were coming across in the materials. So one of the posters is displayed on the slide. That's for kind of primary age, and that comes in an A1 size. So we had a lot of those printed, and we provide those to settings amongst other resources when they sign up to the campaign. Other things that we've done include we've had 2 sets of ambassador training, and we've had a good number of schools in early year settings, and also members from PTAs come to those ambassador training sessions. So that's been really helpful in kind of upskilling key members of the school communities in some of the messages, and helping them to then go back and support the wider school to take part in the campaign. And when we launched the educational settings strand of the campaign, we also had our primary and secondary parliaments, which are kind of people participation in voice events. So that really helped to get everyone talking about sugar, and we had a debate as part of the secondary one. So that was really good, and then the young people and children felt quite infused, and that helped to get more schools on board with the campaign. So you can see that to date we've had 35 primary schools, 4 secondary schools, and then we've also worked with our university sites, our college and our early year settings. And we decided to link our educational side of the campaign heavily to Change for Life, due to the promotion of the school zone and the resources that Change for Life offer. And we really like the food scanning app. We think that's quite an easy one for families to use. So we kind of made sure we embedded Change for Life in our materials as well. So in terms of what we were asking schools to do to be a sugar smart school, when we launched our campaign, the Sustain website wasn't quite ready yet. So we felt that we wanted to give the schools some steer as to kind of what we expected everybody to do. So we had 2 compulsory pledges to create a sugar smart display and to deliver a launch and a follow-up assembly, which I wrote and provided them to schools. And then the feedback felt that schools wanted a little bit of ownership and a little bit of choice around what pledges they could make. So similar to the model that Bristol had been using, we then had 4 kind of optional pledges of which we asked them to choose 2. So thinking about having families on board with the campaign and asking them to set a Sugar Smart challenge. So on the display board in school, parents and carers could come in and write out a pledge for their family and stick it on the school's display board. Thinking about getting children sugar creative, so whether that's making a film for social media, having a debate in school, creating their own resources, promoting Sugar Smart packed lunches, so trying to bring the quality of packed lunches in line with school meals and the school food standards, and then promoting Sugar Smart breakfast clubs, so where schools had a breakfast club, to think about how they could go beyond the school food standards, and thinking about diluting fruit juice and other things that you can see on the slide. And what we found is that many schools have actually gone beyond that, and they've thought about their staff room environment, what messages that gives to children and young people, linked to cooking in the curriculum and food growing and all those kind of things, which has been really great. And then in terms of secondary schools, again, 2 compulsory pledges, which were the same for primary schools, and then some slightly different pledges here to kind of represent kind of the secondary school environment. So again, challenging young people to take a swap, getting young people sugar creative, pledge to be an energy drink free school. So we had some school nurses feedback that energy drinks on the way to and from school were still an issue. So we decided to put that pledge in. Be compliant with the school food standards. So about 85% of our secondaries here converted to academy status between 2010 and June 2014. So for those of you that work with schools will know that they don't need to be compliant with the school food standards. So we thought that was an important pledge to have within being a Sugar Smart school. And then for schools that thought that being compliant with the standards across the school day was too much, we had a pledge around just looking at their snacks. So thinking about their mid-morning snacks, which for most of our secondary schools is where they're not compliant with the school food standards. And then improving vending, we had one school that still had some vending, so we thought it was important to include that. So just to move on, so some of the other work, oops, that's not gone forward, oh sorry, is around work that we've carried out is around kind of school catering. So up until September last year, we had a Baines catering central service, which all of our primary schools were part of. So that was a really important role for me, was to work with the catering provider. We have a local schools food forum where our catering provider sits within that group, and they had already done a lot of work towards Food for Life, or the Food for Life Served Here awards, so around seasonal organic and things. So actually the sugar agenda, was quite an easy one for them to work towards, and they were really enthusiastic about doing that, which was great. So we carried out some work around reformulating their menu, thinking about how to reduce sugar in recipes, carried out some training around portion sizes, and I've put some pictures up there, and they were really good visuals. Someone said that they're having problems hearing. Hope that's okay. I'll just try and speak up a little bit. So the visuals were really important, just to really make sure schools were understanding what, and caterers and the staff serving the school meals were the correct portion that children should be having, and how that varied from an infant to a primary up into a secondary. So actually going out and looking at their serving sizes of their puddings and thinking about how the tray should be cut, to make sure they're then serving the correct size of the pudding portion. So we managed to reduce the sugar in the meal by 23%, which was a good achievement, and we were pleased with that. So just to move on, where the Sugar Smart work in schools has been most successful, it's when schools have taken a whole school approach to food. So we've always had it as a requirement within our old Director of Public Health Award, and now our new Public Health in Schools programme, is to have a valid whole school food policy. And this is to really make sure that the school are clear on kind of their ethos and environment around school food, not only to include how food served across the day meets the school food standards, but thinking about packed lunches and requirements, and helping parents and carers to bring those packed lunches in line with the school food standards. Not using food as a reward, and having food coming in for special occasions. So thinking about alternatives for that, and other ways than food, to celebrate good achievements and rewards. Thinking about special diets and food safety, dissemination of the food policy, and also about how the school will review and monitor the policy as well. So really thinking about the whole school food environment and how they're promoting a balanced eating message, and to ensure that their practice within school is in line with what they're teaching in the curriculum, in order to give those consistent messages. And then we've also carried out some work with PTAs. So we had a number of PTA membership groups come to the ambassador training, and that was really important actually. And they helped us to produce the PTA guide, which I know is on the Sustain website for you to download and have a little look at. So it was really important for us to think about that kind of wider work that schools can do. And through our Healthy Schools and the old Healthy Schools programme, we've worked quite heavily with schools around kind of the school food standards and thinking about their messages within their curriculum and what they're serving across the day. So for us, we wanted to kind of go beyond that and think about the work with PTAs and how we could influence some of the cake sales and things. And we know that PTA and fundraising is a crucial part of school and schools' budget. So we're really supportive of their role, but it was just getting them on board to think about how we could support them to make changes. I won't go into details around the school food standards and what the expectations are for PTAs, because I know that Marion is covering that in her presentation. But some of the things we kind of challenged PTAs to do was to think about, are they offering a balance at school discos and at summer barbecues and things? Are there other options there, for children and parents and carers to have, thinking about the Eat Well guide? Could they limit the amount that can be purchased? So offering smaller amounts, and thinking about other ways of fundraising. So could there be other alternatives, like a savoury sale rather than a cake sale, physical activity fundraisers, and selling things that children have grown, such as foods and plants. Also around kind of informing families, so making sure that families are aware of what's being served, so then they can alter, the food provision for children outside of, the school day as well. So parents, some feedback that we had from parents and carers felt that it was quite important that schools would inform, families of what will be available. So maybe they can alter their diet, around the school day. And then thinking about drinks options as well, we had some feedback that some PTAs are still serving fizzy drinks and things at discos. So just a reminder that, water and milk are the sugar smart options, and they should be more readily available. So just to finish off, in terms of some of the successes that we've had, so I've just got a couple of slides around some schools and some of their feedback, which we've had. So this was a primary school in Catering, and they undertook a whole school food project around Sugar Smart as part of their Healthy Schools programme. And they kind of really embedded the Sugar Smart messages across the school, so you can see the children there with their display that they made. And they had a Sugar Smart breakfast event. You can see there that the children were very enthusiastic about the swaps that they made and the pledges that they made on their boards. And then some feedback that teachers and SMAs reported that the children appeared to be calmer and that they were keener now to have, some of the Sugar Smart options instead of the high sugar alternatives, which is really great. And then finally, a school in Radstock, so this was within one of our target areas. They actually decided that they wanted the children to deliver a presentation to parents and carers. They felt that it was more effective coming from the children rather than from the teaching staff. So they coincided their Sugar Smart presentation, which you can see in the picture there, with a bedtime stories session. So the bedtime stories is something that happens across quite a lot of our schools. So I'm sure some of your schools may have a similar thing where children go back to school in the evening in their pyjamas or their onesies, and they read a story. And this particular school also invites parents and carers in at the same time, because it's only kind of a short 45-minute session. So they get quite a high footfall. So it's kind of a captive audience are at the school. So during that session, the children delivered a kind of 15-minute Sugar Smart presentation, which was quite interactive, and it had, have a guess and guess how many teaspoons of sugar are in various products and things. And actually, the school had really good feedback from that, and I think the school were able to demonstrate the work that they've done around their school menu and changing things, which then empowered the parents and carers to make changes at home as well. And we've also, with some of our schools, managed to get some of their stories within local newspapers and local press coverage and magazines, which has helped us to then recruit more schools, because we've had the offer of, that media involvement as well. So you can see the quote there, that they've managed to then take on board some of the messages and thought about what they're serving in the staff canteen, which is good. The school also had a breakfast porridge morning, and you can see that the head said that the children loved having the porridge, which is good. And then just a nice quote from a Year 6 pupil. So Sugar Smart will help the children have a better, healthier life. For example, when they leave home or go to university, they will make healthy choices. We now know how many teaspoons of sugar we should have a day. I can't believe that in one can of Coke there is more sugar than we're allowed in a whole day. So those messages around kind of where the sugar is hidden, and how much is in some products has kind of helped us to kind of get those messages to families, really. So I think that's all for me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Claire. So we've had a few questions that have come in. Just to let you guys know, we will be going into the next presentation in a moment. So we may not be able to answer all the questions, but we'll see how much we can pick up in the Q&A after her presentation as well. But I think some of them, there's some interesting questions that came in. Kirsten, who's working on an article for the Geladio magazine, which is something that is published by Sustain. She's had a few questions for people in terms of in terms of addressing that kind of culture around sweet treats in schools. So I think what we can do is put those questions out after the webinar, because it'd be interesting to get some feedback from other areas. But I think a good question is how have attitudes of pupils, parents, and the meal providers themselves, so the caterers, the cooks, the servers, how have their attitudes affected the success of campaigns? So whether this is really something that helped or hindered your campaign, if people had set views about what a school meal should look like, or where people it felt like they were really ready to take on those changes and create a new culture around school food. So I don't know, Claire, have you had any experience with that in your work in Bain?
It's actually been really positive. So everybody seems to want to talk about sugar. It just seems to be the hot topic. So we haven't had too much disgruntlement, really. So yeah, I mean, we haven't. So on our school menu, we removed kind of a cake item. So just one day of the week we had fruit and yogurt, and we actually wanted to have that on 2 of the days of the week, but that didn't get approved. So we just had that on one day. So there is the pudding, but it's just got lower sugar in it. So actually we haven't had anybody that's had real concerns or caused any problems with that. So it's been really well received. And I think when you explain the reasons why and actually show them what the recommendations is and how easily that can be exceeded by other items outside of school, then they soon realize actually you're trying to do it to support kind of children's health and well-being. So yeah, it's been really positive.
Fantastic. And I don't know, Marian, I know you haven't started yours, but if you have anything to add on that in terms of your work in Islington, whether you experienced any sort of barriers around the attitudes, I think particularly like attitudes of parents or the meal providers themselves, or perhaps even head teachers.
I've actually had the opposite, where people come to me and say, why are we still serving desserts, rather than concerns that we're reducing sugar. So it hasn't been an issue, and actually people have been very supportive of it.
Well, that's so interesting. It's such an interesting question. We'll put this out to the network, because I think this is one of the things that we're looking at through Sugar Smart. It's not just about the changes, but really that kind of the culture around food in schools and what we expect at the end of a school meal, really. And there were a couple of other questions that came up. I do want to go into Marian's presentation in just a couple of minutes. And this is a good question that came through from Mariella. And she's asking about the school policies around sugar. And I think this probably would include lunchbox policies, is how they're enforced or stuck to. So, for example, if head teachers or parents do not wish to abide by them, are they free to do so? So I think it would be interesting in terms of getting schools on board, but also in terms of what happens at individual school level, where parents go, you know what, I'm gonna pack an unhealthy packed lunch because that is my right to do so. Any thoughts from the presenters on that?
I would think that it's up to head teachers to decide what is accepted on the school site. Just like they can say no smoking now it's actually law, of course, but before they could say no smoking on the school site, and I think they can do the same with what foods are allowed and not allowed on the school site. In Islington, it's slightly easier because actually we've got universal free school meals across the primary school. So if children are having packed lunches that lunchtime supervisors deem to be too unhealthy, they can swap it for a free school meal. So it's slightly easier. The child wouldn't necessarily go hungry. But yeah.
Thank you. There's a couple more questions, but what I'd like to do is move on to the next presentation. So let me just load that up. Fantastic. So once it's loaded up, Marianne, if you want to take over and take us through the work that you've done in Islington. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for people listening in, I will be saying when I go on to the next slide, because Vera will have to do that. So just in case you're wondering why I'm keep on saying next slide, please. So I've been working in Islington for many years. I'm part of the health and wellbeing team, which covers healthy schools as well as healthy early years. If you go on to the next slide. We have in London, we have Health Schools London, so our criteria have to be meeting Health Schools London criteria, or they can be above. So some of the things we have might be slightly above the Health Schools London criteria. And we have support from the Health and Wellbeing team for schools to meet the criteria. So we've still got the Healthy Schools team. So can we go on to the next slide? So here's information on the criteria that relate to food that schools need to meet to achieve bronze. So and we are funded to work with all schools across the boroughs. So any school that wants to be recognised as a school have to meet those criteria, and that's also then obviously for academies, regardless of when they're funded, or free school meals. So although the funding criteria agreement might not say that they have got to meet them, if they want to become health schools, they do. And in Islington, all schools are part of the, they either work towards healthy school status or they've achieved health school status. And I have for a long time already been working with schools around things like fundraising and providing alternative options for cake sales and birthday cakes, parties, special events, treats and rewards for many years. So for schools to be recognised as schools, they have to meet the standard for school foods, regardless of they're an academy or not. We can go on to the next slide. So the standards for school food, obviously they apply for food, any food served regularly by schools between 8 AM and 6 PM. And schools can serve schools can serve other foods only if they're served occasionally. So I did ask Wales Children's Food Trust School Food Trust still existed. I asked what that meant occasionally, and they said about once every half a term. So that means that something like a cake stall can be run by a school once every half term. So that's what we've interpreted as. But of course, the standards also say that whenever schools are providing food, they do need to provide fruit and vegetables and water. So if it's a cake stall that only sells cake, they're not meeting the standards, even if it's only once every half term. So encourage schools or PTAs to become creative and think about all the other ways that they can raise money. They would actually enhance activities at the school. So it's like Claire was saying, things like, a skip-a-thon, a read-a-thon, or if they have a garden, children can be involved in growing seedlings, and then of course plants, then produce, and at the end of the season in the autumn, children can save seeds and make seed packets. And herbs, of course, can be sold all year round. So this would tie in very well with teaching children about business and enterprise. And if schools still want to sell baked good, then think about savoury products rather than focusing on just sweet ones. Can we go on to the next slide? And I talked to schools about what food they have at parties as well. The school talked about how they changed from asking parents to bring in usual party foods, which meant that children would rush in to eat the kind of crap food and be wild for the rest of the party, to change to serving fruit only. And what they found was that the children now come in, play games, and they'll go over and get some fruit from time to time, and the whole atmosphere has changed for the better. So it's a party really that's much easier to manage, and actually children having much more fun rather than being really wild. I also challenge schools on the idea of birthday cakes. Many schools will say that they don't actually serve it, but share out the cake to parents when they collect the children. I think that's just passing the buck to the parents. Of course, the children know that the parents have been given cake and will pester their parents to get it. I know from experience how difficult it is to resist your children then. So, of course, if you think about 30 children in a class, you've got 39 school weeks a year. So it's about a piece of birthday cake a week. So when I challenge teachers, I'll ask them what it is they want to achieve by having a birthday cake. And I think what we want to achieve is for a child to feel special on their birthday. And of course, we can use cake, but there's so many other ways of doing this. By using a cake, we reinforce the message that we have foods high in sugar and fat for special occasions. So next time we kind of get into this pattern of that we want to reward ourselves, we buy ourselves a treat high in sugar and fat. And then maybe another time we feel low and we need to have a pick-me-up, we treat ourselves again to a food high in sugar and fat. And we may be conditioned to do so, but do we need to condition our children to view food like that as well? And I think in addition to that, it's often the children who most need to be made to feel special because they do not get it from home, who are the ones who do not bring in a cake for their birthday, as the parents may not have the money or are not organised enough to do so. So these children who need it most will be missing out yet again. So I think it's a real inequality issue as well. So I think that it's good to think of other ways to make a child feel special. There's so many ways to do it. They can have a badge, a sash, they can be teacher's helper for the day, they can choose a story to read. There are lots of different ways of doing that rather than reverting back to the birthday cake. At one school, at the beginning of the year, all children make birthday cards, and on their birthday, their child will receive one of these cards. So it's a very creative kind of getting children to do their own birthday cards for the whole class as well. So it's a really nice way of doing it. We go on to the next slide. So I've been working with schools and children's centres around these kind of issues for many years. However, I hadn't really put much work in looking at desserts until 2016. We have a borough-wide contract that actually is the same across Camden and Islington. So in Islington, it includes half of the children's centres, with about 40 or 46 primary schools and 3 out of 10 secondary schools. And I'm part of the contract monitoring team and involved in writing the tender document. However, until recently, I'd never looked in great detail. I was, like many others, thinking dessert was just part of the school meal. In autumn of 2016, I had a dietetic student on his public health placement, Neil McCreener. I organised for him to find out how much sugar was served at Camden and Islington schools within the catering school meal contract and to come up with recommendations to reduce sugar in desserts. Neil visited 12 schools across the 2 boroughs to observe presentation, desserts on offer, as well as weighing the dessert. He also did some research on good practice happening in other schools and boroughs to support his recommendations. The findings on the amount of sugar in dessert were quite alarming, where some desserts contained more sugar than the total of a child's daily recommended sugar intake. The portion sizes served varied greatly and often were larger than the caterer's recommended portion size. And I don't know, it could be that sometimes school cooks were serving larger portions as they were serving an adult male rather than a child, and therefore increased the portion size. However, the caterer's recommended portion size, as provided on the recipes, was larger than the school food plan portion sizes. And the dessert options chosen for the menu were in some cases high sugar desserts. Neil also found that the school cooks were good at promoting desserts, but not always as good at promoting fruit. Sometimes the dessert was prominently displayed, while the fruit was kind of more hidden, so not as obvious for children to ask for that. We can go on to the next slide. So we, on the basis of his findings, he put together a set of recommendations. So things like staff training. Firstly, to ensure that dessert options were more evenly cut and in line with the recommendations. So therefore, not only reducing sugar guidelines, but also reducing on ingredients, because the portion size would be smaller, and therefore costs are a win-win situation. We find that sometimes children could help themselves to the yogurt, so it'd be good if yogurt was served as a set portion by the caterer rather than a serve yourself option. Staff be much more actively encourage children to choose fruit. So if they're encouraging children to choose something, then talk about, would you like some fruit rather than would you like dessert? And make sure that staff prepare, present and display the fruit attractively. And again, it varied very much from school to school. Some schools would have just quarter piece of apple and orange, while others would have a proper fruit platter and different types of fruit as well. Changes to the menu cycle. So as part of the menu cycle, initially we went to just serving pudding 4 days a week, and now it's been cut to 2 to 3 pudding, having 2 to 3 pudding-free days. One of those days we have crackers and cheese and or apple on the menu rather than sweet dessert, and then one day at least where the only dessert offered is fruit or yogurt, like Claire mentioned. We also found that catering actually had in their recipe repertoire, they had sometimes similar desserts, but different recipes. So some would be much higher. So it would be very easy to just choose similar desserts, but with a lower sugar content. And to develop different sugar desserts with more increasing the fruit content and reducing the sugar content. And to serve low or no sugar yogurts as part of the recipe development. At the end of the project, Neil and I met with Catering to discuss the findings and ways forward to reduce the sugar content. Catering were very receptive and took on our recommendations. They already developed a draft menu by the time we presented the findings. So based on the recommendations, Catering went back to that menu and changed the desserts. And I looked at those 2 menus which were for the spring and calculated changes. And based on a number of children eating school meals within the Catering primary schools in Islington, and taking into consideration the ratio of desserts and fruit served across the borough, in Islington alone, Catering served 1,744 kilograms less sugar in that first term than if since they started to implement the recommendations. So comparing the draft menu with the actual menu that we then had based on those recommendations. So in April 2018, we started a new contract. So this is, we had a chance to put some of those things into it. Catering was our preferred caterer across Camden and Islington, so we've been able to continue to work with them on reducing sugar. And having the new contract meant that, yes, we were able to rise some of those expectations on reducing sugar in the contract. So we now have that all desserts need to be dairy and or fruit based. So for example, no plain sponge or chocolate brownies can be served unless it contains fruit or vegetable and or dairy as a substantial ingredient. Desserts, excluding fruit and yogurt, can only be served 2 to 3 times per week. The maximum amount of sugar content in a primary school lunch is 6.5 grams, and for secondary schools is 9 grams. And then for children's centres, it's 4 grams over the whole day. We expect an overall reduction of sugar in yogurt from 4 grams at the beginning of the contract to no added sugars by this April. Plain yogurt may be served with fresh fruit or tinned fruit and juice or unsweetened stewed fruit such as compote. And Catering has stepped up to the challenge and has come up with fruit stations where children can choose different toppings to go on their unsweetened yogurt. They've also been very clever working with the idea that we use all our senses when we eat and play it around with sight as well as taste. At our monitoring meetings, we're asking Catering to report on the amount of fruit purchased each term to ensure this increases over the length of contract. So again, it's going back to the caterers or the school staff, school catering staff, having to promote the fruit over the dessert options. So, and as Vera mentioned, this work we've done with them has now been taken across their whole contract. So it's been, they've been very receptive to it, and are not just putting this into action across Camden Islington, but across other schools as well. But so it's been very successful work with them, and I think it makes a big difference, especially, as I said, we've got the universal free school meals across Islington. So it is really important that we give children healthy options as their lunch every day. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Marion. That was very interesting. Thank you again to Claire for her presentation as well. Definitely lots to think about, and please do send in your questions. There were a few other questions that would be great to pick up. And we've also invited our colleague Barbara, who coordinates the Children's Food Campaign, because I think it would be quite useful for her to add something to one of the questions that came through. But just to go back to some of the earlier questions, Anna from Barnsley Council asked, what do presenters or Sugar Smart think is a good recommendation on a percentage reduction of sugar in school catering? So Claire and Marion, if you, or Marion, if you want to start, and Claire, if you have anything to add in terms of what you think would be good recommendations on percentage reductions or total reductions in terms of grams.
So we have, rather than going by percentage, because it does depend on a bit where you start off, we have an absolute. So we're saying no more than 6.5 grams in a primary school dessert and 9 grams in a secondary school. Actually, it's across the lunch, not just the dessert. So if they're using sugar in the tomato sauce, then that would be included rather than percentage.
Thank you. And Claire, I mean, do you have anything to add to that?
I guess, like Marion said, it depends what the starting point is. So I think ours was what, 20, we managed to use it by 23%, but it's hard because we have fruit and yogurt available every day. So, you know, you can't count for every child's choice during the school meal. Does that kind of make sense? Because obviously it depends what they have. So I think Marion's guidelines are really good in terms of kind of the maximum amount of, you know, for a primary school and for a secondary school age child. So that would be something to work towards, I think.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. We had another question from Bob from Food for Life, which I thought was really interesting. It was sent directly to us, I think, rather than in the chat. Who asks, what needs to be done at a higher level, so really at a government level, to just in terms of making more robust school food standards, and perhaps anything in terms of kind of enforcement or monitoring, which I think is a really good question. And I think it would be useful to get Barbara's input, but primarily it would be great to hear from the presenters on really what needs to be done at a higher level. So
I would say it needs to be, this needs to be as part of the school food standards. So I think having the amount of sugar that can be served at lunchtime should be part of the standards. I would also say, I always think that, you know, we've got a traffic light labeling criteria, and I think that would be great if that was used for school food served outside of school lunches. So, for example, breakfast cereals. There's nothing stopping a school from serving breakfast cereal that's 45% sugar, such as, you know, sugar puffs or honey puffs, whatever. And actually, if we're saying it has to be within the amber area of, you know, sugar, for example, that would be really helpful as well, I think, or green area of the sugar criteria kind of thing. But yes, it has to be set as a standard that all schools need to meet. Sorry, Claire.
No, that's okay. Sorry, interrupted. I guess I think that, you know, the school food guidance document, which is what we use heavily in Baines, it does, it does suggest that, schools serve that medium level of, cereal and sugar. But I think it depends what documents you look at and how much knowledge you have as well, because we've done quite a lot of training here locally. And actually there's been a lot of inconsistency, across what's being served. And that's not always done with intent. It's people's own understanding and mixed messages that they hear. So, the standards are good because now they don't have to use the nutritional software, which was a barrier for, some of our schools before. But actually they're very open to interpretation. So I think, there needs to be a level of training provided and what have you for, individual schools to make sure that they're following that. And we've done some work with governors because ultimately meeting the standards sits with the governing body. So, we've tried to raise the profile here by working with governors to make sure that they're challenging their school providers, around kind of, what's being served. And we hear from catering providers that, contract companies that they go to say that, this drink's school compliant when actually it's not. So there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of mixed messages around, different influences around school meals. So I think we need a bit more of a consistent approach.
And that guidance you mentioned is not law. And I think that is, that is optional. And I think that's one of the issues with that. I think the other thing with that, you talked about how to monitor that. Now, one of the things I did for a while in Islington for schools that are outside of the contract. So within the contract, I'm part of the monitoring team, but outside of the contract, how do we know that they're meeting? And yes, we've got a checklist and that sort of things, but as you said, Claire, schools don't always understand what these things mean. So I worked with environmental health officers for a while, that when they go and check when they do the inspection for food safety and hygiene, they'll also check the menu to make sure that that's compliant with the standards. And there's no reason why that is not done nationally, because actually, if it's law, environmental health officers, just like they can inspect on smoking and that sort of things, are there to enforce public health law. So it should be really as part of their remit. And of course, a lot of environmental health officers, teams or departments in the council are very stretched as resources. But if that was given as an additional part and funding to go with that, there's no reason why they shouldn't be doing that. They've got to go and do the inspections for food safety and hygiene. They've got the knowledge around nutrition because as part of their training, they could go and do the inspections to make sure that the school food standards, that law is being implemented across schools.
Oh, thank you so much, Marianne. I'd like to bring in Barbara from the Children's Food Campaign to add a few things that might be of interest, but also perhaps a call to action as well.
Yeah, and that's really interesting what you were just saying about the environmental officers, because I think, as you were saying, there's nobody really systematically, and there's no national scheme for monitoring compliance with school food standards. And obviously, if we're bringing in a healthy, the government has promised in Childhood Obesity Plan Chapter 1 and then repeated in Child Obesity Plan Chapter 2 that there ought to be some form of schools healthy rating scheme, which includes food. It might not be only food, so food and food education, I think, is what we're really pushing for. Obviously, there are arguments around that, including also physical education. It could get quite complex, but clearly there are school food standards that are mandatory for some state schools, some academies before or after the certain dates. Not free schools are exempt from those. They're voluntary only, and private schools obviously completely voluntary. So the question of who does it, Ofsted did previously in its inspection framework have a reference to healthy eating. That has been removed from the currently proposed framework that is open for consultation. So I would really recommend, if there are local public health people and food coordinators and school food and caterers, that they contribute into the Ofsted framework. But the question of whether it should be Ofsted inspections or environmental officer inspections, I think is probably a good one. Somewhere it's falling between the cracks.
Barbara, can I just, because
yeah.
I think one of the issues with offset inspections is that their background is in education. They do not have a food nutrition background, and therefore all they can do is a general, you know, in some general kind of, oh, is it healthy or not? But sometimes when they've made comments in their reports, it's very questionable on what they make that judgment on, because they do not have that background. So I do have a real issue. I mean, I think it's good when they do ask about it, but actually,
I'll take that away with me. I think thank you for that. So the Children's Food Campaign, Jamie Oliver Organisation, Soil Association, Food for Life, and School Food Matters, we're having a meeting in a couple of weeks to kind of look at the conversations that we want to have with the Department for Education over the healthy rating scheme, and what we think the bare minimum should be, and what we think the kind of compliance and monitoring should be. So I think we'll take that into that conversation. In the meantime, School Food Matters, and we put this out on the Children's Food Campaign newsletter, but we can tweet out links and send links out probably following the webinar, are doing a survey of parents, teachers, governors, or anyone else involved in school food to see what they think about a healthy rating scheme that we're trying to use as part of those conversations. Meanwhile, school food standards, our understanding is that there is, again, it was announced in the chapter 2 that there was going to be what they called a bold update. We understand there isn't going to be a formal consultation. For healthy rating schemes, we understand they're thinking of piloting it on a voluntary basis, not introducing it as a mandatory national scheme. School food standards, they're thinking of not having a consultation, but publishing an update. And more or less, we understand the thinking at the moment is just to bring the school food standards into line with the latest SACN guidance, which is about increasing fibre and reducing sugar. So sugar will be part of that update. Again, we're liaising, but any sort of demands for something much more radical, I think, feels like at the moment that's out of scope. And that one is also there. Well, I mean, we've seen it recently. They're kind of worried about announcing too much while so much is up in the air with Brexit. So that's been a political delaying tactic, let's say, but that's where we are on that. So please do get in touch if you want to kind of get involved in any of those campaigns. We'll send the link to the survey.
Yeah, well, ahead of sending out the presentations and the question and answers, I think because it's so time bound, we can email all of the registered attendees after this webinar with the information on the action that Barbara had mentioned.
So until the 14th.
Yeah, so there's only a week left. And for those listening after the 14th, hopefully you'll be getting involved in other ways. Thank you so much. There have been a couple of other questions. I'll put one question out for people in the chat to perhaps contribute to, and then we'll ask the presenters to add in any thoughts. Somebody was asking if there are schools that have gone completely dessert-free, so cutting out the desserts entirely. So if you're working with a school or in a school, then please do put that in the chat. But otherwise, I think there was another question would be really good to capture here in the webinar from Lynn from Winchester, who wants to know if the barrier, if cost is a barrier to caterers making changes in the school menu. She's put the question out in the chat. So just around desserts being relatively cheap to produce and balancing the kind of caloric and nutritional content of what the desserts contribute to the main meals. I wanted to know, she'd be interested to know if anyone's had discussion with their school caterers. So if you've had any, Marianne and Claire, if you guys have had any issues around this or no?
Yeah, we did. So I talked about when we reduced just to sugar and fruit only for one of the days, and we wanted to reduce it to 2, but it wasn't agreed, and that was because our dietitian said that, like what Lynn's put, that they wouldn't meet the energy requirements within the standards. So yeah, we did have a similar discussion here.
That's, yeah, no, very interesting to take that into consideration. Marianne, did you have anything to add?
No, cost hasn't been an issue for us. So obviously we've just gone into a new contract, and that would have been costed as part of what they're offering. So
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. And another question, I think, before we wrap up, from Anna from Bristol. She wanted to just check the Marian, this is a question for you, in terms of the 6.5 grams average and 4.5 grams, 4 grams average, 6.5 grams average, and the 9 for secondary schools. Are these total sugar, as in carbohydrates, or just refined sugar as an ingredient?
That's free sugars.
So yeah, okay, cool. So I think that's great. We've had a couple of other questions. We are capturing all of them. We will send the questions around to the presenters. But we're just about running out of time. We will leave the webinar open till 3:30. So if you have any more questions to add, you can still do it. But we will wrap up the recording of this webinar in just a couple of minutes. But just once again, I want to give a huge thanks to both of our presenters, Claire and Marian. It was really interesting, really elucidating. Thank you to Barbara for contributing a bit more information on what's happening at a national level to influence school food standards and provide a bit more of a level playing field. And a big thank you to Fran, who will be taking over the Sugar Smart campaign. And thank you to all of you who have joined. It's really brilliant to see so much engagement on this issue. Please stay in touch. Please send in any questions. So it's really, really good discussion. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to Vera, of course, as well, who's soon going to be going on her maternity leave. So we wish her all the best of luck.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck, Vera.
Cheers, thanks.